not documented, it didn't happen. I really appreciate y'all inviting me down here, and thank you, Joey. I do, and I appreciate you coming down on Saturday. And I have a 7.5 hour trip when I leave here to get home, so I promise not to hold you up past 3 or 4 o'clock. Now, I'm kidding about that. I'm kidding. But I have a lot of things to cover, and everything I'm going to cover, there's a purpose behind it, okay? So I'm going to try to make it quick, but I have a lot of things I want to talk about, and hopefully by the time y'all get home, I've taught somebody something or kind of help remind you of something. I want to ask the first question, and I don't want anybody raising their hand for this one, but how many of you, don't raise your hand for this one, but how many of you have ever been in an accident, been in a crash? You know, and like I say, don't raise your hand for this one. A lot of times I will call it a crash because usually somebody in this accident, it's because they did something on purpose. So the next question, and I do want you to raise your hand for this one. Has anybody ever woke up in the morning and said, well, I think I'm going to be involved in an accident today. Today's my day to be involved in an accident. No, I didn't think so. You know why? Because this doesn't happen to you. This happens to the other guy. And one thing I do want to mention, I'm going to tell you just a little bit about myself. I don't want anybody to think that I've spent all my life as a safety manager for TLC or People-Ease. I drove a truck from the time I was 18 to I was 45, most of that flatbed. I was safety director for Cypress Truck Lines for 10 years. A lot of y'all may know them. They're a 500 truck flatbed company. I was safety director for Design Transportation in Dallas, 200 truck dry van company. I moved back to Florida. I went to work for as a safety manager for a Hub Group Trucking. One of the things that Hub Group Trucking I thought was really interesting, they taught us, we had a thing called Work Rate, and they taught body mechanics. And I kind of, one of the things I wanted to mention now, I'm just about 70 years old, and there are a bunch of you aren't anywhere close to that, but some of you are getting on up close to me. And one of the things I want to remind you is you're dealing with chains and straps, and I don't want any of you to do this right now because it looks kind of goofy, all right? But our shoulders are some of our problems we have to deal with. You throw straps, you throw chains, you deal with cheater pipes. Something I want you to do every morning, and before you get out there to tie down your load, and this is kind of a stretch, it's a warm-up, but I want you to do it and push it. How many of y'all ever do push-ups anymore? Last time I did a push-up, I was about 17. But do it like you're going to push as far as you can, and then bring it back like here until your shoulder blades are, and do that several times, all right? There's another thing, it's a good one. And your shoulders up, your shoulders way down, your shoulders up, your shoulders. Do you ever watch Frank Sinatra? When that music would start, you know, that's what Frank Sinatra did, you know, da-da-da-da-da, start spreading the news. But anyhow, Frank Sinatra died a few years ago, but he never had a shoulder injury in his life. So anyhow, that's one of the things I want you to think about in this business. Now, I want to take you back to Apollo Beach, Florida, and it's just south of Tampa if you've never been there. I had a driver, and he had just loaded a big old load of sheetrock. And he is about to pull out of this gypsum plant, and he's coming up to Highway 41. There are 2 lanes going that way. There's a little grassy median, but a paved area where you can cross. There are 2 lanes going that way. Ironically, this is Memorial Day weekend. This driver, he wanted to get, you know, he's going to have a long weekend. He wanted to get his truck back to the Tampa terminal, get in his car and go home. He lived in Tampa. So he could have went up and made a right turn on 41, went up to this, I can't remember the name of the road, made a left turn, got on the interstate, and went back to our terminal and got his car that way. That would have taken him about 20 minutes longer to do. but he was wanting to get home. All right? So what he decides he's going to do is make this left turn and cut across there. So he's watching, and we've all experienced this kind of thing. He is watching. He wants to get across. There's a lot of traffic that afternoon. 2 lanes that way, 2 lanes that way, and he's watching. By the way, y'all throw chains a lot here, don't you? It's not just straps. You deal with chains. The way I always did it, I want to say that everybody else did. The way I do things, I'm sure that you feel the same way. The way I did it, I think, was the right way. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done it that way. I hook the chain on the rub rail. I grab it and I make a couple of big loops in it. And then I have a torn meniscus in this left knee. When I do this, if I scream in pain, you'll know why. But you'll swing it back like this a couple of times, and then you will want to make sure I don't hit anybody, and then you will throw it over, right? Is that about the way you do it? Okay. Have you ever thought about, especially when you get older like me, have you ever thought about just taking a 2-inch belt, take a couple of those 2-inch straps, belts, throw them over the road, hang up your chain on the rub rail, throw them over and get on the other side and pull the chain over. It's going to take you about 10 minutes longer to tie down every load, but it's not going to take as long as going through physical therapy. So anyhow, that's just a thought. You're trying to do something to save all that. And by the way, I told you at Cypress, we train drivers out of driver school. And so we would send them through a 6-week training program. And they all had, the trainer and the trainee had to wear hard hats. Because those guys would take that chain and at first they'd throw it up and you'd come right back down on top of them. So anyhow, my driver's wanting to cut across these 2 lanes. And you know how it is. So he's looking this way and the traffic's starting to lighten up this way. And there's one car coming and it's starting to lighten up. So this is his chance to go. So he starts cutting across the road. There's one car coming. Okay, we've all been through this. This one car is going to have to slow down or really come to a stop. They're going to be a little mad. You're inconveniencing them. They're going to blow the horn, maybe, give you that finger. But this is your chance to get across. So he's going to go across there. Here comes this car, and he's watching the traffic through his chance, and he's getting across the road, and all of a sudden he feels the impact. He gets out of the truck, and he looks, and this young lady's car, the back of her car is on this side of the trailer, the front of her car is on this side of the trailer. And this lady, needless to say, is very, very dead. I hired an adjuster. I hired an attorney to the scene, sent to the scene right then because I knew it was a fatality. The newspaper, they had, helicopters flying over. There were cameras. This is all in the news. I went down to interview the driver the next day, do a little investigation. I went to interview him. And he told me, and he was never given a citation. He told me, I will never be able to get behind the wheel of a truck again. It just traumatized him so bad. He was trying to save that 20 minutes, and instead he's got a fatality accident. And by the time he dealt with the accident, he was not cited, but it was still a DOT. It's still a fatal accident, so he still had to go for the mandatory drug and alcohol screen. So by the time he did all this, he was about 5 hours late getting home. So what did he accomplish? Okay. So once again, that was just one. I had another driver. This isn't quite so serious. But, by the way, I got some of these bands off Amazon. You can get about 8 of these bands with different strengths on them. And another way to exercise your shoulders, just kind of pull a little tension on it. Do this 8 or 10 times. And once you get where it feels pretty good, after you do it 8 or 10 times, you're going to feel it. I saw one physical therapist, he did it with a pillow and he'd pull it, but put 1 or 2 pound weights on them. So my driver, he's there in Marietta, Georgia. He comes up to a stoplight, and he needs to get where he's going. So he's going to make a right on red. So he goes to make his right on red, another, big old load of sheetrock. And here comes a car, but he's in a bigger hurry than the car is, and the car is going to slow down. Again, he's going to inconvenience somebody. So he makes this right turn, and sure enough, here's the impact. They rear-end him. Now, in this case, it wasn't that bad of an accident. It damaged the car. It damaged the radiator, the front end of the car. These 2 ladies get out of the car, and they run up there, and they're yelling at him, and they're jumping up and down and screaming and saying a bunch of bad words that I don't say anymore. And so anyhow, I had the terminal manager call him, had to go back to the terminal, after he did get a citation. He had to go back to the terminal, so obviously he's late for whatever he was wanting to do. The load was late. The trailer's damaged. I suspended the driver for 5 days. I did not fire him. But here the guy is. He has an accident, and like I said, by the time you go through the drug and alcohol test, he was a couple hours late getting home. So here's another case of somebody, oh, by the way, the 2 ladies who jumped up and down and went like this, I'm about to fall down here. The 2 ladies that jumped up and down like that, they went home like you were talking about. They went home, and somebody told them and said, well, wait a minute, you've been injured by a big truck. Said, we're not injured. Well, they got an attorney, and by the time the attorney sends them to their favorite doctor, well, now they're injured. So now they're walking around, with a neck brace, and so anyhow, that's the way it is. So, and one thing a lot of people don't realize is when the lawsuit comes through, I'll get this lawsuit, and it's going to say they're going to be suing us. In this case, it was Cypress Truck Lines. And then it's going to say the name of the driver. And then it's going to say operating in a negligent manner. I've had drivers before call me after an accident. It may have been months, sometimes a year later. Hey, wait a minute, they're suing me. Well, of course, you were the driver. So you're not always going to get off. And by the way, the things I'm telling you are not made-up stories. These are not things I've heard from other people. These are real-life experiences that happened to me as safety director. So I have a driver in, actually what I'm doing, I'm sitting in my office in Jacksonville. And I've got a pretty good staff. I have about 4 people around me in my office. And one of them takes the phone call. And it's the call nobody ever wants to take. And she says one of our drivers has been in an accident, in a crash with a loaded school bus. So I take the call. It turns out my driver's telling me that, and the driver tells me, he says, I was going along and had a load of side on. He says, I was just going down the highway and this school bus turned in front of me. That's what he said. But anyhow, he said there's at least 1 child dead. There is a second one that could be dead, and then you have a whole bunch of bumps and bruises, the other stuff. So I had somebody go ahead and finish taking the information. I got in my car, and I'm going to drive down. It's about 4 hours down the road to, I can't remember the name of the town there in Central Florida, and it's around Melbourne, but it's right off Melbourne. And so I'm driving down there. I stop and I holler at the owner of the company. He's out there on his golf cart looking at stuff. I tell him what I'm doing. So I drive down there, and by the time I get to the crash site, the scene's still active. The police are there by now. It's getting dark. I pull up and I tell the police who I am. And the first thing they said, listen, there's nothing your driver could have done. That school bus turned in front of your driver. Nothing. I talked to the trooper. Nothing your driver could have done. It's absolutely the school bus driver's fault. So I went and checked into a hotel. And I started watching the news. And on the news, it's a school bus turned out in front of a local truck, a loaded truck. So everything really looks good, right, on our side. Well, I kind of hung around, and because it was a school bus, I hung around that town for a week, wanted to see what else. NTSB comes down, there's a lot of investigations. And to kind of move along with the story some, I also went to where the bus driver, I went to his court, I just wanted to watch it. He pled guilty, he lost his license. But when it all comes down to it, we had this big global mediation, and we paid $2 million. And you ask, why would we pay $2 million? One thing, in Florida, the way it could have been, a jury could have been on a civil suit, could have been saying, well, you know, and they don't have to be able to justify this. They know that the school bus did this, and the jury could have said, well, the truck driver must have been doing something. Let's just say the truck driver is 10% at fault. And then it's a $100 million judgment, which could very easily be. Now that we're on the hook for $10 million. That's why the owner of the company and our insurance company decided to go ahead and settle for $2 million. Now, at the time, we did not have, or a bunch of our trucks did, that particular truck did not have the Lytx drive cam, did not have the driver-facing camera. Well, I'm getting a lot of evil looks here. Did not have a driver-facing camera. If that truck would have had a driver-facing camera, because there were some questions, you know, about whether he was on his phone or not. But if we could have shown that that driver was doing everything properly, not on his phone, alert, watching what he was doing, and did absolutely nothing wrong, we wouldn't have paid anything. So there's $2 million that would have saved us. Now, I was trying to look at some statistics a little while ago, and a truck driver, some of you guys I know have been around probably in this business for a long time. A truck driver who drives 100,000 miles a year for 20 years, you have about a 15% chance of being involved in a serious crash like this. 15%, that's, you know, if I can point at any one individual, if you're going to drive for 20 years, 100,000 miles a year, you have a 15% chance of being involved in a serious accident like this. It's not much, is it? However, if you were about to go board an airliner, and I said, well, you had a 15% chance that that airliner is going to crash, everybody's going to get off the plane, right? I figured that I buy 2 tickets a week for the Powerball. And if I buy 2 tickets a week for 20 years, then I have a 1 in 114,000 chance of eventually, after 20 years, winning the jackpot. It's not very good odds, but I still buy those 2 tickets. So the biggest thing I'm getting at is just keep in mind that this stuff can happen to you. You know, the times you start thinking about, well, I'm going to do this. And like I say, I drove for a lot of years. I know the temptation. I know what it's like. Well, I'm going to pull out here these folks that's going to inconvenience them a little bit. But they're going to stop. There's this great big load of sheetrock out there. You know, they're going to stop. Well, sometimes they don't. So just want you to keep in mind that this stuff can happen to you. Also want you to keep in mind what I was talking about. There are a lot of different things I'm dealing with. I say I have this torn meniscus, and so I deal with a physical therapist, and it's a whole lot easier trying to do your stuff and not get injured. In the safety business, we don't see our successes, we only see our failures. And if you start doing these, and there are a whole bunch of different ones. These are just 2 different kind of things you can do. And if you do it on a regular basis, you know, probably helps some. You may never know if that helped you or not. If you never have a shoulder problem, you may never know if that's what helped or not. But if you don't do it and you do have a shoulder problem, come on, you know, you're throwing chains. So anyhow, take the time to do it. You don't have to do it in front of anybody. Do it when you get up in the morning. do it before you get out and tie your load down. Let me mention a couple other things since I'm way ahead of what I thought I'd be. I kind of cut out some of the fluff. Oh, by the way, I forgot to ask. Did everybody check underneath their table to see if there's a $20 bill taped under it? Everybody check under their table to see if there's a $20 bill taped there? Well, see, nobody's wasting their time too much. Actually, I think I taped it to one of the tables back there, so somebody's getting a free meal. While I'm thinking about it, you mentioned earlier about if you're injured, even a minor injury, make sure and call that. And when I'm with TLC, I'm a safety manager because we do your work comp, right? So I see all the accidents and injuries come through nationwide. So make sure and call it in, even if you think it's nothing, because if you have this little injury that's nothing, you step on a nail today, it's not a big deal. I'm going to put a Band-Aid on it. No big deal, and a week later, your ankle's that big, and you're reporting it now. I mean, it always just looks strange to people when you wait that long to report stuff. And if you go ahead and report it, call the number and say, no big deal, I don't need to go to the doctor. They're going to write it down. Nobody's going to make any big deal about it. And if you don't go to the doctor and never hear anything again, then nothing's happened. However, 3 days later, so, well, I need to go see the doctor now. And you wouldn't believe how sometimes it's 2 weeks later. It really stands out. Last thing is I'm going to mention, PPE. Little things. And I don't mean you have to wear a hard hat unless it's your company policy. But I'm thinking about things like gloves, okay? You're tying down the load, you've got your cheetah bar there, cheetah bar slips, you hurt yourself. Probably happened to somebody around here recently. You hurt yourself, okay, a lot of times just gloves will help. I do not even mow my lawn at home without safety glasses. And tomorrow morning, I'll be mowing my lawn. And if it's sunny, I'll be wearing some kind of wraparound sunglasses. If it's not, I'm going to get clear glasses and wear them. Take the time to wear the safety glasses. I don't know if it's in kind of a company policy or not, but do it for your eyes, all right? Okay, what did I miss? Everybody ready to go home? All right. Okay, well, I kind of cut out the fluff, or I could have made this last about 20 minutes longer. So I appreciate your time, all right? And I'm not dismissing people. Better leave that up to Joey or Luke, all right? But again, thanks for your time, everybody.